Hello and welcome back to Dave's Movie Diary. I'm talking about a film called Eraserhead from 1977, David Lynch's first full feature. There are trailers you can go onto YouTube and watch for this one. I didn't put them at the start of this episode like I usually do because there's no explanation of the film. There's no real dialogue. It's just the sounds interspersed with the images. And it's much more effective if you just go and look for yourself. It's incredible, actually. It's pretty hard to get my arms around this film and talk about it. It's like trying to build a house out of jelly, or I don't know. I've only just finished watching it. I'm still pretty dazzled by it. One thing I have realized is that I've definitely come at this film in the wrong way. I'm not making much sense, am I? Let's start again. I first saw this film when I was about 24 or 25 at the end of the 90s. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me at the time. I think I just watched it so that I could cover off all of David Lynch's films at the time, up until then. This would have been before Mulholland Drive came out and Inland Empire as well. I think by then I'd seen everything else that he'd put out. And I would have been trying to understand the film and trying to work out what it was about and follow a plot. And that was definitely the wrong approach. Since then, and it's a bit like the way I treat Shakespeare. I just read it, let it wash over me, and take what I can from it. And generally, I get the overall picture. I don't pick out every little nuance in a text like that, or like a film such as Eraserhead, which is an artistic statement. I don't think it's meant to be deciphered line by line, frame by frame. Of course you can if you like. I just don't find that approach works for me with films like this. And understanding that now at this stage in my life made a huge difference to me. I'll try and give you a plot summary briefly about what this film is about. The film follows Henry Spencer, played by Jack Nance, and he lives in a very bleak industrial environment. The film's shot in basically in black and white, but there are hues, tones within that. But yeah, basically in black and white. There's no color. There's no real color in the film. We follow Henry walking home from his job as a printer, and he makes his way past many dilapidated, abandoned factories and industrial visages, and comes home to his little apartment there. When he gets there, his very sexy neighbor comes out and informs him that she has a message for him, and that his girlfriend wants him to come for dinner that night at her place with her parents. He goes there and has a very interesting, what seems to be a first interaction with her parents. It's impossible to summarize what happens at that dinner. You just have to watch it. I will say it's It has to be on the podium for most unusual first interaction with a girlfriend's parents. He's asked some very direct questions by his girlfriend's mother, including whether they've had sexual intercourse yet. Understandably, Henry is reticent to answer that question. His girlfriend's mother presses the point for a reason, and then informs him that his girlfriend has given birth to something, and that they should get married as soon as possible. She then commences trying to, I think, give him a hickey. And it's at that point that his girlfriend comes around the corner and is outraged at what's happening. But that's a very simplistic summation of the evening with his girlfriend's parents. Anyway, they go back to his place, and indeed, she has given birth to not a child, a creature, which I can only summarize as a slug-like creature, maybe like a cross between E.T. and Greedo. Not a very attractive little fella. And we're then pulled into an even stranger domestic situation in Henry's flat for the rest of the film, basically. The offspring of their union is very unsettled and is constantly crying. Will not stop crying, and the couple don't get any sleep, and Henry's partner soon has enough, freaks out, and leaves back to her parents' place, leaving Henry to care for the new addition to the family. He tries to settle the thing using various methods. He even tries to take its temperature. That's quite an interesting scene. At some point, he appears to go to sleep and then has a series of incredible dreams/nightmares. The nightmares involve his partner performing on a small stage in an ornate setting with a curtain behind, and it appears she's got a terrible case of the mumps. Very, very reminiscent of dream sequences from Twin Peaks, just without the color, but the same sort of, like I said, ornate environment, formal, baroque is the word I'm looking for. He intersperses these nightmarish themes with some more attractive dreams, maybe wishes involving his sexy neighbor, where she comes in, says she's been locked out, needs a place to stay, the classic kind of intro to a bad porno. And they proceed to have fun together, but not in bed. Bed has been replaced by some sort of a pool, like a mini sort of a spa, to which they both appear to drown in. Weird and wonderful things happen after that, and as Henry tries to adjust to this whole situation, things get even stranger, and we go from narrative realism into even more surreal sort of psychological states. It sounds as though I'm trying to belittle the film, and I'm not. I really enjoyed it, and I was fascinated by it, but trying to sum up what it's about is really tricky. There's a lot of interpretation. It's inviting interpretation anyway, if you take the opportunity. David Lynch. Um, he's. I said this is his first feature, um, but I think what's interesting is that even though this is his first feature, I'm sure for most people probably isn't their first Lynchian experience. Sadly, David Lynch passed away not that long ago. Might have been last year, um, and that was very sad because he was a unique voice in cinema, and just artistic expression, I think. Famous for films such as The Elephant Man, which did very well at the Oscars and um, may have even won Best Picture. I can't quite recall. John Hurt as the Elephant Man. Of course, he had the first crack at Dune, the film that's subsequently been remade by Denis Villeneuve recently, Dune 1 and Dune 2. Blue Velvet, um, Wild at Heart, Twin Peaks, the TV series, the revolutionary TV series, and the film Fire Walk with Me, Twin Peaks spin-off film. What else? Broken Highway, Mulholland Drive, Inland Empire. There was another season of Twin Peaks. There were various other things, but I think that's the bulk of David Lynch's output. Incredibly quirky, creative, original. Always interested, I think, in depicting everyday, humdrum, boring suburban or conservative life and spicing it up with nightmarish, surrealist, off the wall, terrifically provocative elements. Some of it's very funny too. If you're into that, there's lots of black comedy, lots of ironic references. Yeah, I find it fascinating. I live for this sort of stuff, I've got to say. Watching Blue Velvet for the first time was a revelation to me back in the day, and probably changed my view on a lot of things. Anyway, this is his first crack at it, and it's amazing to me that this came out in 1977, and knowing not knowing, I wasn't old enough. I was 4 or 5, but I just think it's fantastic that he was given other films that showed his range and just his body of work, the different things that he did, especially early on when he was still probably trying to find his feet. Elephant Man, Dune, this, yeah, amazing. The world, the world he designs in this, I really was drawn to the lo-fi feel of the film and the industrial atmosphere. It nearly felt to me like a 1950s matinee visual quality, but obviously completely inverted in the tone and the subject matter. This stuff is far more bizarre and surreal than you'd get in those times, I think. There's a constant industrial decay running through everything. There's like I said, abandoned urban space everywhere, railway lines, griminess. It really creates a world that feels familiar and alien at the same time. And then coupled with the sound design, this constant industrial hum, really disturbing. Goes throughout the whole film. It's revved up and down at times. There's definitely no rhythm or musical relatable tones to it. It's not dramatic. It's not uh, it's just adding pressure, in a way. And like the environment itself is never fully silent and really pairs perfectly with everything visual on the screen. Um, just that dinner scene too. Just thinking about it again, the dinner scene that Jack Nance goes to as Henry Spencer, uh, his girlfriend's parents' place is yeah, it sets the scene early for complete and utter weirdness. Uh, his girlfriend's father brings out what appears to be a chicken dish, but it's tiny little chickens, and Henry is asked to do the carving, do the honors, and he starts cutting into it, and blood pours out of it everywhere, and the chicken's still moving. This little chicken, and his partner's mother um, starts having like an ecstatic religious experience, I think, with a tongue lolling out of her mouth, making all sorts of weird and wonderful noises. She then gets up and goes into the kitchen and does some other food preparation with an older woman who is completely motionless. She eventually lights a cigarette for this woman and she can't even draw on it. It's amazing. Everything's really, well, everything feels slightly ritualized rather than natural. Classic Lynchian performances that he's eliciting from these people. You know, you think of Twin Peaks even. Everything's stilted in a way. Nothing, not too much is natural apart from some of the locals, I guess. Um, these simple domestic actions engender some very strange happenings. Um, yeah, I'm not doing a very good job at summing this up, but that's David Lynch. He's very, I find him very hard to get a handle on. I do enjoy talking about him though. Jack Nance, as the central character, Henry Spencer. A couple of really striking early details that leaped out at me about Jack Nance in this film. One is the bouffant hairstyle, which he's recognised for in this. I think people who think about this film think about the cover image, which is him looking completely surprised with this hair going off into the distance vertically. It's unusually formal, almost immovable hair, which gives him a really displaced presence in the world. And Jack Nance, as an actor, always seems to have this surprised look on his face. You think of him in Twin Peaks, you know, the body wrapped in plastic. He's that guy that finds Laura Palmer right at the start. And yeah, really unusual guy and just a unique actor that we used to have. We used to have a lot of these people in films. Less so now, I think. He's got this fantastic pocket protector as well, which gives him this pre-pop cultural nerd aesthetic. I feel like the Revenge of the Nerds in the early '80s kind of ended the pocket protector. It really had a run there for a while. And anyway, it's rolled out in this one as well, but it doesn't feel like a joke here. It just feels like part of his identity within this slightly off version of reality. Even at this early stage of his career, I can see where David Lynch's interests are going. It's not just the narrative, it's even things like the design of the rooms, which I know he had a particular interest in. He was very OCD about this stuff. He demanded that the furnishings were just so, and that they were placed in particular ways, and they add something to the domestic tension and the behavioral awkwardness of everything. Everything is staged. Nothing nothing is loose or natural in David Lynch's world. And yeah, definitely an early look at what he would make a career of. Dreams, of course, another thing that David Lynch is well known for and probably the best at, especially nightmarish dreamscapes. It's just a recurring thing with him. Sometimes I do get frustrated in some of his films that seem to be going on really, like I'm really into the film, and then there's a dream sequence, and then it never recovers, or I don't recover, probably more like it. And sometimes I don't notice, or I can't tell, which I know is the point when we get back to logic. But sometimes I'm so into the movie, is so engaging without it. I think, why couldn't we have just stayed with it? But I know that's a silly thing to say about a David Lynch film. There's plenty of other films I can go and get. Let's go from point A to point B. With David Lynch, sometimes you never get to point B, but just going on the journey from point A to somewhere, you end up at P or Q or Z instead of B, is the fun. There's a lot of emotional states in this film that override logic, and that's like yeah, thanks Sherlock, I guess, comment from me, if you know anything about David Lynch. But this is when he rolled it out for the first time. Lots of unclear boundaries between internal and external experience. What's really going on as compared to what's going on in the emotions and the minds of the characters that we get a front row seat at. And of course, this becomes a signature across his work later on. Just some other observations. I thought that the female presence in Henry's world felt like an early version of a recurring Lynchian type. I'm talking about his partner in this film. She reminded me a bit of Laura Dern. She had that same energy, being fairly passive but alluring and interesting. Blonde, sort of look quite similar in terms of emotional positioning within his stories, and also the sexy neighbor figure. Strongly echoed for me ideas that blossomed in Blue Velvet. If you think of the Isabella Rossellini character, becoming a part of Kyle MacLachlan's world, and he's just a normal guy in a country town trying to solve a mystery. That idea of an ordinary man, I guess, being drawn, not that Jack Nance is an ordinary man in this film by any stretch, but still, an underwhelming an underwhelming figure being drawn into a destabilizing, emotional and psychological space through a captivating, out of his league female presence. But interestingly, this female presence, like the Isabella Rossellini figure, feels seductive, obviously, but troubled and alone, and somehow needing help and available. It's a really interesting dynamic that seems to occur again and again in some of these films. And that just a side note, Judith Roberts apparently is the actress who plays the sexy neighbor in this film. And like I said, she has this slightly unreal, dreamlike presence. She's got an incredibly striking face that's full of expression but perfectly proportioned. And she fits perfectly into David Lynch's world. You look at I can't remember the actress who was opposite Naomi Watts in Mulholland Drive, but it's that sort of dynamic. And Isabella Rossellini, like I said in Twin Peaks, not Twin Peaks, Blue Velvet, and there's plenty of other female characters in his other, even in Twin Peaks, um, that had this same energy. Anyway, I thought she looked familiar because she appears in Stardust Memories, the Woody Allen film, that was Sharon Stone's first ever appearance as well. That's a film I never connected with, by the way, Stardust Memories. It was a much weaker Woody Allen film for me. I just thought it was faffing around and not. It was quite insubstantial and a bit. It was a whiny one for me. It was like, yeah, it was about the perils of fame and how hard it is to be famous, and I get it. It would be tough, but yeah, that one just didn't land with me. Yeah, I thought it was interesting seeing the same performer exist in two completely different cinematic languages like that, and she has a presence in both of them. Really briefly in Stardust Memories, a bit more in this one, um, and I don't think that she ever went on to anything significant compared to other well known people, but she feels really natural in this. She feels like she was born to play this role, and David Lynch seemed to have a knack for finding actors that that had that dynamic in his movies. So look, yeah, second viewing, nearly 30 years later. Geez, I watched a lot of movies in the 90s. That's what I'm realizing by doing this pod, especially late 90s. I recall, you can tell I led a really boring life by the late 90s. I was trying to calm down a bit, I think. In my late 20s, I was getting through 3, sometimes 4 movies a day when I didn't have anything else to do. So that's why I often say late 90s. I saw a lot of these films. I was just ticking things off. Yeah, what a time to be alive. I just let this film wash over me, and instead of trying to decode everything, like I said, I just sat with the images. I just reacted to the experience, like going to an art gallery, or I don't know, watching music videos, and not concentrating on the music, just letting the images and the vibe of the film just wash over me, and I'm pretty sure this is the opposite of how I first watched it. I was expecting, even though it was David Lynch, I was expecting something more linear, which was a silly thing to do. And I definitely didn't understand why it was a cult film. I thought, yeah, it's so different. Yeah, that's great, but it's so bad. Now I get it, and not because this viewing explained it to me, because it doesn't need to. It's just an experience. It's just 89 minutes, I think it was. I've got 89 minutes to spare to just feel something different and appreciate a master creative spirit like David Lynch. Is this a date film? Well, big surprise, no, I don't think it is. I would not recommend taking a first date, to see this film if it's being shown in a retrospective cinema somewhere, unless you're both really weird people. I'm not sure. I'm not sure this is ever going to be a date movie, like a date night movie, even if you've been together for 10 years. Um, Again, unless you're really esoteric and like the weirder things in life. That said, I would recommend doing that more than watching this with a hangover, or if you're not on your game. I couldn't imagine anything worse than struggling with a hangover and then trying to decipher this, or just live in this space for 89 minutes. If you didn't have the DTs already, you would by the end of it. You'd be seeing spiders on your walls and all sorts of weird things. Yeah, don't watch this after a big night. That's what I'm trying to say. It would be an interesting double feature if you're up for it, with things like Basket Case, that cool early 80s film. or maybe It's Alive, that came out in the mid-70s. I picked both of those because they both involve couples having offspring that they weren't expecting. Let's put it that way. So that might be an interesting double feature. Final thoughts. When all's said and done, this is a completely original, bizarre, and unsettling experience. So thank you very much, David Lynch. That's what I signed up for. And I'm really glad I gave this another try. And more importantly, you can see the blueprint of David Lynch's entire career. Well, some elements of his entire career. Those things being the mundane and the surreal coexisting, often flipping back and forth, and then you're really struggling to keep up. I think that's what he's after. Domestic space becoming unstable. Yep. And obviously the big one, dream logic overriding reality. Duh. That's David Lynch, but it's all already here in this film. He just refines it and plays around with it more, and probably gets better at it, or more a bit clearer, a bit easier to follow, maybe. So it's not a film you can solve. It's a film that you sit inside. One last thought for me is that I could relate to the parts where the couple just could not get the offspring to go to sleep, and there's a scene where Jack Nance is there. She's already left and gone back to her folks. He calms the creature down, and then he tries to tiptoe out, maybe to go and check his mail or see his sexy neighbour. And he's just about out the door, and it starts shrieking again. And oh my God, some memories came back to me of trying to settle both my kids, who are now, nearly 21, nearly 19. I thought I had them settled down. Creeping out of the room, they wake up again. I go back and sit down, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And I could really relate to the way that this couple got so frustrated and then had some weird experiences. And it took me back to how it felt then, when I wasn't getting any sleep for a couple of years, and the world did look a bit like this. I wasn't seeing weird worm-like Greedo characters, and didn't have a neighbor like that either. Or I certainly wasn't pulled into the maelstrom of emotions that Jack Nance is in this film. But I can relate to to being so tired that things aren't real anymore, or the world's so grey and you just can't have a clear thought in your head. So I'm glad that's a long way in my review mirror. All right, that's it. Eraserhead. That title, by the way, is solved later in the film and is worth hanging around for. So, yeah, I'd say enter at your peril, but it's David Lynch, right? You should know that you just expect the unexpected. I found this movie on Canopy with a K. I've talked about it in other pods. It's a cool, free, on-demand service you can get. It's linked to your library card if you have a library card. If you don't, it's probably worth getting one, because you can find a lot of films that you can't find anywhere else on Canopy, like Eraserhead. So, yeah, check it out. And thanks again for listening. See you next time.